All right, Chris, I hate to turn this into a sports podcast, but I have several sports things to talk about.
Okay.
I have several things to talk to you about sports today. And they're even both kind of 90s sports things. So I promise after this, I'll put it to rest for a little while. Do you know about the baseball/football player Bo Jackson?
No.
Okay, he was very big in the 80s and then into the 90s. And obviously, most professional athletes don't play multiple sports, but Bo Jackson is known as one of the only people in the modern era of professional sports to play baseball and football and be good at both of them. And he had retired by the time I was a little kid, but I had a video game that I borrowed from my brother. It was called Bo Jackson Hit and Run. I actually booted it up this week just to see how it aged. Not well. There were like 6 people that made the whole game, if it kind of tells you budget and things. And you don't even play as Bo. You're playing baseball and then you're playing football. And sometimes if you play poorly, a little screen comes up where Bo gives you advice on like how to play defense. It happened at one point during the game because I think I like took a snap in football and accidentally just downed the ball immediately where I was at. But this is beside the point. So with Bo Jackson, he is known for being very good at sports. He really had a mastery of football and baseball. But I want to talk to you about something he's been struggling with recently.
Okay.
Bo Jackson has had a case of the hiccups for the last 10 months, and he cannot get rid of them.
10 months?
Yes. Since last July, he has had the hiccups, and he recently really revealed this to the world because he was invited to some sort of ceremony for one of his former teammates. And he's known for being very big in Alabama. He grew up in that area. And he was on a radio show with an Alabama DJ. And they said, hey, why didn't you come to this thing for your friend? And he said, well, I've had the hiccups and I kind of didn't want to, which cannot blame him.
No.
That's got to be tough. But then he goes on to start listing all of the things that he has tried to get rid of these hiccups. He hung upside down and drank water.
Okay.
And then after that, he had people scare him. Did not work. And then he said that he smelled the butt of a porcupine. I think that's a joke.
I hope so. I've never heard that one. Is that something that people say?
I don't know, but I'm thinking about other animals that have similar situations, and it doesn't sound that weird. Like, for example, do you know the thing with deer, how they have like the gland, like where the musk smell comes from? So like similar situation near the butt. You have beavers. For a long time, people used that as an imitation vanilla. There was like a gland in their butt, and it would flavor vanilla in like the 1800s.
Wow.
So
it's a strong smelling thing. Maybe it'll get it out of you or whatever.
Right, exactly. So who knows if that's true or not. But I was thinking about Bo, like he's somewhat of a celebrity. He probably has an agent. And I was just imagining this scenario where like it would be very tough to be his agent at this time dealing with this. So I found her. Her name's Becky. I messaged Becky and just to get some more information. And surprisingly enough, she has not gotten back to me. But I was just imagining the scenario that would happen. Like, it's a Saturday afternoon. They go over to Bo's garage, and Becky comes over there with a checklist that just says upside down drinking water and scare Bo, obtain a porcupine, and yeah, I feel very bad for what all is happening to Bo, and if he would like to come on the podcast and talk about it in the future, just letting you know, Bo, we would love to have you.
Open invitation. Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you anyway. My name is Chris Humphreys.
And I'm Payton Gessel.
All right, so Payton, we actually went on a walk before we recorded this,
We
right?
sure did.
So you're a walker. Are you a runner?
I am not a runner, but I am an avid walker. I'm currently in a walking challenge at work, and that's partially why I asked you to go on the walk. And my goal is to get 10,000 steps a day for the 6 weeks that I'm going. But to really answer your question, I am participating in a fun run on Saturday, but I will not be running.
Okay.
I will be walking because I do not run.
Okay, you're not a runner. Okay, so me neither. I am probably the farthest thing from a runner, to be honest with you. I'm not a super athletic person. I'm not super good at that kind of thing. I'm not a runner. The last time I ran a timed mile was probably in 5th or 6th grade when they made you run a timed mile in middle school. And my fastest time during that period was like 8 minutes, which is not a fast mile,
No.
not even for a 5th or 6th grader, right? I was last place in the class. To be fair, I went to a small school, and I guess that's, if I was a bigger school, maybe I'd have a high chance of not being in last place, but I'm not a good runner. Even then, I wasn't a good runner, and I just don't run, right? But one thing Kirsten and I did get into when we lived in Colorado was hiking, which is, I don't know, it's adjacent to running, maybe, right? It's an outdoorsy moving from point A to point B, right? And so we got kind of into hiking. In Colorado, you've been there, to the Rocky Mountain National Park. There's all kinds of amazing, super beautiful hikes. Like, you can hike to some of the most beautiful scenes you've ever seen in your whole life, and there's a lot of hikes that are super easy to do. So it's easy entry to some extent, but the more you do it, the more you kind of want to do harder stuff. And so we got into a few harder hikes, and by no means were they difficult, right? They weren't actually hard hikes. They weren't the crazy 14ers or anything like that. But we got into some that were multiple miles one way and a lot of elevation gain here and there. And I got to see some sights that I will never see again unless I do those hikes again. Some sights that I can hardly believe even exist on Earth. But I got into hiking, and we never really got into super demanding things, but it was very fun. I still kind of enjoy it. It's not near as fun to hike in Ohio as it is in Colorado.
Very flat.
Very flat, and when it's not flat, it's like very, very humid, which makes hiking less fun, right? But it's still a fun thing. But hiking, I did. Running, I did not, right? And I enjoy a challenge sometimes, but there's a challenge that's too much for me. When I was in college, my school, every year, they campaigned and then recruited to get people to run the Chicago Marathon, right? And it was all for a charity. You would raise money, you would do the training and run the race and campaign and tell people about the charity and collect money and then do the run. And that was the whole point of it, right? And I kind of thought that'd be a fun thing to do, but it's a marathon. And so I didn't ever actually consider doing it because I can't even run 1 mile, let alone 26.2 miles. There's no way that would ever happen.
Is this for World Vision?
It was for World Vision.
Yes, I know people who have done that exact marathon.
Yeah, that's what my college was. I went to Olivet Nazarene University, and it was every year they did that. And there was a large amount of students that did it. And a lot of people who you would think wouldn't run a marathon. A lot of people use that as motivation to try and to do. And it was amazing, really. And I'm not saying it would be physically impossible for me to do that, but I don't know. I cannot imagine a world where it's physically possible for me to run a marathon, honestly. It sounds unattainable. But I have many friends and acquaintances who did that. I know a lot of people who did. And I asked their stories, and they told me all about it, and it was interesting. I watched a documentary about 5 years ago that I have since thought of a few times, but it was obscure enough and on Amazon Prime Video, something I couldn't remember what it was called. I couldn't remember the exact subject matter of what it was about, but I thought about it a few times and I couldn't even locate it anymore. But it came to my attention again just a few weeks ago. And this documentary was about a fairly obscure, very difficult race. And the reason it came up again is because this is difficult enough that over the history of this race, which is 40 plus years, only 17 people have ever actually completed it. And the reason it came up again is because I saw an article titled 3 People Complete the Barkley Marathons in 1 year. Okay, have you ever heard of the Barkley Marathons?
No.
The Barkley Marathons take place in Frozen Head State Park in the state of Tennessee. Don't know where Frozen Head State Park is, but that's where it's at. And you think 26.2 miles is a long way, right?
Sure.
The Barkley is what you call an ultramarathon. And I didn't even know this was a thing. I didn't know it was a category. It turns out there's a whole category of ultramarathons. But it consists of an unmarked off-trail 20-mile loop that in order to complete the race, you have to do that loop 5 times. So it's 100 miles, and 20 miles is the approximation. That's kind of as they mark out the race. But the fact of the matter is it can be like more like 26 miles per loop because of the elevation and the fact that it isn't on a marked out path. People take slightly different routes. So it literally can be like running 5 marathons at one time, right? Which is crazy because, like I said, I can't even imagine doing one. I can't even run a mile. So the fact that there are people...
You could run a mile.
I don't think I could run a mile.
All right, we need to stop the episode. Chris and I are going to go run a mile quick. And we're back.
I can move. I walk a lot. I can walk a mile. I could even briskly jog a mile, but running is so difficult for me, truly. Like, I'm just not in shape. I have super flat feet and really long legs, and I'm unaerodynamic. They didn't build me for running, right? And so the fact that there are people on the earth that exist who can do this, right? And you don't get this. You don't just have to do it. There's like rules and a time limit involved in this. There's 2 types of the Barkley Marathon, 2 official, unofficial ways. Well, one's more unofficial than the other, but the official one is 5 loops of this 20-mile course. And that's just the Barkley Marathons. It's called the Barkley Marathons, right? Because it's multiple. There's another thing, which all the runners call the fun run. That's 3 loops of the Barkley Marathon. So there are people who join it and they just do the fun run, or they attempt to just do the fun run, or they do the whole thing. But this is where it gets even more difficult, and why so few people have completed it is because you have 60 hours to do the 100 miles, or you have 40 hours to do the 60 miles, right? That means you get 12 hours and some change to do what's pretty much a backpacking hiking trail, 20 miles, 5 different times in a row, right? Which is crazy. And then something else that's crazy is this, over the course of the 100 miles, it does 55 to 60,000 feet of elevation gain. So we're talking over a mile of just up. That's not counting the down. So like we're talking 2+ miles of different height changes over 100 miles. It's insane.
Yeah.
Physically demanding.
I have a question about tools and equipment.
Sure.
Can I bring trekking poles? Am I able to bring a backpack?
Yes. So I actually don't know exactly what you are allowed to bring in. I know if you have a phone, you're not allowed to have it turned on, and you can't have GPSs. You have to use a park map and a compass. And you're allowed to use like walking poles, and you're allowed to dress like however you're supposed to dress to be an outdoor, because it goes on rain, sleet, snow, whatever, right? This usually takes place in like the late spring every year. And so, yeah, you're allowed generic hiking supplies and food and whatever, but like it's nothing like that would give you an advantage or anything. And every year only 35 people are allowed to compete in this, right? And there's some ruling about why that is. Like, it has something to do with the park, but it's also, I suppose, to create exclusivity, which it definitely does.
As if the amount of the distance they're traveling didn't create the exclusivity.
Right. Because I'm sure there's millions of people wanting to do this.
Right. I'm in line right now.
Exactly. Now that you know what it is, it's just like, oh, I got to sign up for it. But that's something that's interesting. Not only is the event itself fascinating, the history and the secrecy that surrounds it is just as fascinating. First off, it's organized by this guy named Gary Cantrell. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. But he also goes by the name Lazarus Lake, which is a pretty dope name. I don't know exactly why he goes by that. He's a runner, a distance runner, and he's an organizer of a bunch of these kind of things. But how this starts, right? It's like filled with a lot of ritual and background and tradition, right? It's almost like in those movies you see about like underground poker games where like you just show up and you know what's going on and you get in. Like it's that kind of thing, except it's like the application process. It's not publicly available what the application process is. So you have to find out what it is. And I know it involves, from everything I've found, I know it involves an essay of some sort that can be funny or sarcastic or serious or whatever. that's all I know. Like, and then, you have to write one of those as an application plus do some other things. And then if you get accepted, there's like an interview process that I guess contains super whack questions. So I don't really know. I read, there's like an AMA on Reddit of a guy who completed this, and he talked a little bit about the whole thing, but he's like, I can't really talk too much about it because it's kind of a secret or whatever. It's literally, you have to find out how to apply, and then you have to apply. And then through the applicants, you have to get chosen through a random system that's chosen by Lazarus Lakes, right? This dude has created how he picks who comes into it, which I guess is based off of multiple things, like sometimes complete randomness about applicants, sometimes your previous running history, sometimes, whatever, like things he knows about you, all that. It can be a bunch of various things. But it's a pretty exclusive thing. It's pretty hard to get into. And so no one knows how to do it. But when you do happen to get into it, you all come to this park, and it starts anywhere between midnight and noon. And how you know when it starts is the guy blows a horn, okay? And everyone hears the horn. And 1 hour from when he blew that horn, you line up at the starting line, and you know when to start running because he lights a cigarette. That's how this thing starts. I know. It's insane. It's like... It's wild. And this is like an insane accomplishment, right? For someone to complete this. Like literally I think it might be up to like 20 people maybe now have completed this total. And the quickest one being like 52 hours, right? So we're talking like 2.5 days. And that's it's just mind blowing. And you wonder, because obviously there's no one, following these people like in a traditional style race where they have cars that drive around or bikes that ride and they follow the people. So this is sort of based on an honor system, but it's also like there's strategy to it, and there's also a real system that must be followed that they've put in place. So they have anywhere from like 9 to 15 books scattered throughout the track. So they kind of help keep you on track, and there's a map of where they're located. But what you do is you have a runner number. And so when you get to the book, you pull out the page number of your running number. And then once you do a lap, they change your running number. So every lap, you have to go and you find the book and you pull out a different page so that you can show proof that you have been to every book on the path. And so it's being able to physically do it, being able to find your way through the woods, but also being able to locate all these books is another part of it. So like, it doesn't matter how good you are at running if you can't find your way to somewhere. It doesn't matter it's just crazy. It's just like difficult task upon difficult task that seems impossible, but somehow some people have done it. And it blows my mind. In the AMA that I read of this guy's done a lot of long distance runs before. And he said this is his proudest accomplishment, and that he had deep sores on his feet that lasted a month after he was done. My feet hurt just thinking about that. That's wild.
So here in a few days, the Memorial Tournament is going to start up in Dublin, Ohio. Are you familiar with the Memorial Tournament, Chris?
No.
It is a golf tournament that is put on by Jack Nicklaus, famous golfer known as the Golden Bear. And he started this tournament several decades ago, I think probably just because he wanted to have a golf tournament in his backyard that he didn't need to travel to. It's at a real course, not his actual backyard, but you get the idea. And it becomes a very big event in the greater Columbus area, especially for the area where my wife works at. She works at a fine dining restaurant, and it's pretty close to the golf course. So she runs into a lot of who's who from these tournaments, and sometimes they're just people who are in town for the tournament. And then there's other times when like a pro golfer or a sports broadcaster comes in.
That's cool.
Last year when she was doing this, Jim Nance actually shows up, famous broadcaster for golf and other sports as well. And one of the things that he does when he's ordering there is he asks to have his wine on whenever he dines there. So they put all of his brand wine on the menu so he can just show up and say, yes, I would like my Cabernet, which is quite the power move. Yes, I love that. So I know they've announced all of the golfers who are going to be at the tournament. I don't know a ton about golf myself, but I know Rory McIlroy is a big deal, and he's going to be coming. But there's one golfer that I learned about recently who really just puts all of them to shame. I am talking about Kim Jong-il, former dictator of North Korea, he had a historic golf game several decades ago that really just blows everyone else out of the water. So, thank you to my friend and coworker Aaron for inspiring this story. He and I were working on a video project earlier this year, and it was for a golf-related company that we do work for. And the PGA has a trade show every year, and we needed to make a video that showed off some products for the trade show. And just as we're working on this video, he casually mentions to me, "Hey, do you know about the time when Kim Jong-il had a perfect game of golf?" Man, it is a rabbit hole that I went deep down on recently.
That's crazy.
So this all starts in 1994. A big time of change for North Korea. Kim Il-sung, the first true leader of North Korea, has recently died, and Kim Jong-il had just taken over, and the world is kind of watching to see what is he going to be like. Is he going to be like his father? Is he going to open the country up more? A lot of unknowns. So there's an Australian journalist named Mark Ellis, and he had heard reports of some sort of humanitarian crisis. I think it was starvation in parts of North Korea, and he wanted to check this out. But it's very difficult to get into North Korea. So he has to apply for a work visa, and he's trying to think of a good fake occupation to get into the country that will pique the interest of the North Koreans so that they'll let him in. So he decides to put down that he is a golf course designer, and that was enough. And he was able to go on this trip to North Korea. And I don't know if you know much about the process of going to North Korea. I've listened to some people talk about their vacations they've taken there. But basically you get assigned a handler, and the handler walks you around to all of the different museums and eats with you and goes everywhere to make sure you don't see something you're not supposed to see. And they're there to answer any sort of questions if you are confused about something culturally that you're seeing.
Like the whole time you're there?
I think so. I don't know how strict it is. I'm assuming they stand outside the door when you go to the bathroom or whatever. I don't know. But it is someone who is around the whole time. So Ellis is talking with his handler because you kind of, in a way, you kind of have a buddy on your trip now because he didn't go with anybody else. So he's talking with his handler, and at some point the guy asks, like, "Hey, what do you do for a job?" And he says that he's a golf course designer. And the whole time he is so nervous that he's going to get found out. But when he mentions the golf course designer fake job, the handler says, "Well, this is great. We have a great golf course. We have our only golf course in the country is the Pyongyang golf course, and we should go there tomorrow. We should play a game of golf together. You should play. It would be great." So Ellis knows that this is getting closer to the general direction of where all the hunger and starvation is happening. So he agrees to go do this. And the whole time Ellis is worried that he's going to be exposed as a fraud, and that this is going to be a problem, and just that maybe he's not going to golf well enough, because he likes golf and he golfs sometimes, but it's not as bad as saying he's a pro golfer, but you assume a golf course designer is at least adequate, right?
Right.
So nothing to fear at all. The North Koreans have no idea how golf works. So, for example, if you had to play a round of golf, how long do you think it would take you? Like if you said you have X amount of time, go play 18 holes.
4 hours.
Okay. Well, they gave him 45 minutes. Yeah, they gave him 45 minutes to golf. I think he got 4 holes in before they said time's up.
Doesn't seem too bad.
Right. But he plays the 4 holes of his life. He does very well for himself, and like it definitely fools the North Koreans. They think that he knows his stuff and is good at this. So he comes back to the clubhouse area, and this is where things started to get a little bit above my head golf-wise. So I had to talk to my cousin about this. My cousin Dylan is a collegiate golfer, and he lives and breathes golf and is very good at it. So I spoke to him about a few of these things just to get some more context. For example, I didn't know what a club pro was. I could obviously guess what that might mean, but basically a club pro at a golf course is someone who works for the course they have to go through a lot of certification to be like an expert on golf and training people how to play and giving tips and advice. So if there's anyone at this golf course who should know their stuff, it's this guy that Mark Ellis is about to talk to. So Ellis is talking to him, and he's trying to ask some probing questions about Kim Jong-il. And he's saying, like, I'm so sorry for Kim Il-sung's passing. I'm sure everyone is very distraught over this. And he also asks, hey, has Kim Jong-il ever played this golf course before? And the club pro says, yes, he did. And he shot a 38. So, yes, he shot what would be a 34 under par, which at the minimum would have been 5 holes in one on this course. So obviously that's not right. But this guy, the club professional, didn't even bat an eye as he says this. And I think he just didn't know how golf scores were kept. And that is where it starts to get more interesting. Because I don't know much about the way scoring is done, but I understand that when you see golf on TV, they have the number of what par should be, and then they show what the person actually scored, or that's what's on your scorecard
Right.
you keep, right? So apparently there's another system that when I asked my cousin about this, he had never heard of people keeping score this way, of keeping a relative to par system.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened when Kim Jong-il played this historic game, his caddy is writing down a 0 if he gets par,
Plus
a
one.
-1 if he gets a birdie, like a +1 for a bogey. And ultimately that is what ended up being the 38, which means he actually scored like 105 or
Sure.
something, like a 34 over, a 34 over
34
par,
over.
which is still maybe not great, but probably better than this is his first time playing golf. I think I forgot to say this. This guy says like, oh, that is his first game ever,
Wow.
which
34 over, not bad.
yeah. So I think what happened is that the caddy or whoever reports this and the state-run media hears that Kim Jong-il shot a 38 and they don't know golf either. So they broadcast this to the whole country. So everyone in the country just thinks that their leader is this great golfer and have no idea how ridiculous this is.
That's hilarious.
So I don't know how much real journalism comes out of this trip that Mark Ellis does, but he does bring this nugget of information back, and it starts to spread. It starts to take a life of its own. People start adding more urban legends to the rumor. People start to circulate that not only did he shoot that score, which is 20 strokes above the real high, the real record for a good game of golf, but people say that there were 7 bodyguards who stood watch and witnessed it, and it just becomes more and more of this apocryphal story about golf. So I have said that I don't really play much golf. I've only played 1 real round of golf, and I did not shoot a 38. But this story in a way has kind of inspired me to finally try to start playing. The house I just moved into is very close to a golf course, and I will definitely report in on what I score when I play my second game, and I can only hope it's close to a 38. Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. We have an upcoming episode that we could really use your help on. For our 10th episode, we wanted to do an episode that was full of only listener-submitted topics. So if you're out there and you just want to know more about a topic but do not want to do the research, please just email us at whatsyours@factoidpodcast.com and we will take it from there. We've already gotten some submissions for that episode, but we could really use 1 or 2 more really to round it out. So please just send us an email, and we look forward to telling you way too much about your topic.
And don't forget, you can find us on all the major podcast platforms or on our website, factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.